You have seen me start a painting before, so right now I'm going to get to the details after the initial block in. I did this with the scrubbing technique that I usually use with my oils. As before, I used the Cobra water-soluble oil paints and I scrubbed in the main area and then wiped out with Q-tips where I needed to get the highlights and the details and the main map for future layers. So now I'm working on the eyes, and I like to do the eyes first, partly because that creates the real center of interest for my painting. That's where our eye goes first, and I can then subordinate everything else to that. I can make sure that I keep my main interest where I want it to go. So first I'm just putting in my dark layers. I've got ultramarine blue and burnt sienna mixed together, and I'm using a soft synthetic brush, and I am using just a touch of water-soluble linseed oil. Putting in the areas where I want them really dark. By using a little bit of the medium, it makes the paint flow on smoothly. And next I will start to put the brown in the irises, and I will do that basically with burnt sienna right out of the tube. And if that's not quite light enough, then I will add a little bit of, in this case, vermilion, something that's a little bit lighter red or orange. So I start out by putting the main color in, and then I will go on with a lighter shade. And at some point I'm using pretty much straight vermilion right out of the tube. I've got my pupil and the surrounding areas in black, and I'm going to then put the reflected light in the iris, which will be pretty much opposite to where the highlight will be. And the highlights are coming in from the top. The sun is obviously coming in from the top on this little dog. And the highlights will be reflection of the sky, so I will start painting them in blue, and then I will put them in a little bit lighter shades of really light blue and sometimes almost pure white. I am skipping the video ahead just here and there because it gets quite long. The whole process of this video doing the eyes here took about 17 minutes, I think. So I'm just shortening it a little bit. Right now, these reflected lights are at their lightest, and then I will put in the highlights. So you can see I'm quite careful when it comes to doing the eyes. I take my time. I balance my hand on a maul stick if I need to. And these are some of the most important parts of the painting, so I will just really move along and work slowly, try to get it just exactly how I want it. So the next step is the highlights in the eyes. As I mentioned, blue, reflecting the sky. I put that in first, and then I will come in with a lighter color. If I need to, I can also wipe out a little bit with a Q-tip if I'm getting too much paint on there and it's not going as light as I would like it to. So the first step is the blue, and then going lighter with a lighter blue or even pure white. So as you can see, this is the fiddly and time-consuming part of the painting, and to me it's worthwhile to put the time in that I need to get the eyes just so. I can always come back in with black if I need to lessen the highlight, increase the size of the pupil, refine the outside edges. And once I get the eyes completely finished, the next step will be to work on the nose. So I put the detail here in the eyes and the nose, and after that I can get a little bit looser with my application of paint. And especially when I come to the background, that's one of the reasons I do the background last, is that I can really get quite expressive and even subtle if I don't want it to take over too much attention when I'm working on the background, but I know that I've got my attention where I want it to go with the eyes and the nose first. We are getting just a little bit of photo distortion with the angle of my camera, though it's not too bad. I've found some better adjustments for the camera since I've been set up in my new studio here. But his left ear, it's a little bit large, and I will make it just a little bit smaller, I think, once I get into the painting. But it's also looking quite large because of just a little bit of distortion. This little dog lived upstairs from me when I was in a ground floor suite in Victoria, and he was just a real sweet little thing and would do anything for you to throw him a ball, and that's probably what this look was all about. Come on, let's play. So this is Stoney. He's a very sweet little border collie. I've reinforced my darks here with some black, and by keeping my brushes clean, using different brushes for different colors, it's quite easy to go back and forth if I need to. So now I'm putting some highlights into the nose, just going with some grays and blues, again reflecting from the sky. And I'll do a little bit of refining in that area, and then I will move on to the highlights on the dog. I'll just skip ahead a little bit and show you the next step. So I'm mixing my paints here. I'm going with a series of neutral colors. Some of them are more burnt sienna, some of them are more ultramarine blue, with white added to get the value correct. It's about a value 5 for the shadows of this dog's face. So I'm mixing up some various colors that will work, and then I can just dip from one to the other, and I can either use a clean brush for each color if I want to keep them really clean, or I can kind of let the colors move from one to the other because they're all going to be very similar in value. And at times I will even just pick up on the burnt sienna or the ultramarine blue itself and just move it into the areas using almost pure color because there's already color underneath, and then it will allow the paint to softly blend in the shadow areas. So applying my color anywhere that the area of the dog is shaded. These are the white areas of the dog, but they are picking up brown from the surrounding areas, blue from the sky, reflecting different colors. It's quite fun to paint a white animal in strong sunlight because you can often get so many different colors and variations depending on what color is reflecting into this white. I can add some detail as I go, indication of hair where the dark meets the light. I'm trying to keep my colors fairly pure. I can always soften them later. It's nice to get some good strong colors in there when what I'm really working on is color and reflected light. So for this painting, all I'm using is burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, vermilion in small quantities. I will add some permanent yellow light as I get into the highlights. And I'm using, of course, titanium white. So it's a really limited palette, but it's still quite a colorful painting in terms of the neutrals and the variations I've used. Okay, I'm going to skip the video ahead a little bit so you don't need to watch me paint every single stroke. It's as it is, it's going to get to be quite a long movie here. So I'm quite enjoying adding a lot of color into this area. It's the reflection of browns and golds and other things that were below the dog. Things like fences and grasses and things like that will tend to reflect warmer light. And then there's also some cool light reflecting, and that creates shape. If you haven't got a lot of value difference, color difference will help to create shape. So I'm putting in the colors quite pure, and I can always make them more subtle later, adding a little bit of light here and there, but I'm keeping a very tight value range. I'm wanting to make sure that the shadow stays in shadow and the light stays in light. That's your key. It really doesn't matter what colors you use as much as you keep your values really reading true. You'll also see me moving all around his face from one area to another, up to the ears and down, making sure that I add some of any given color to several different areas. I'm doing a little bit of skipping ahead, again, to keep the video from getting too long. but I want you to get the essence of what I'm doing here. Okay, so I think you're getting the general idea of what I have done with this shadow area. When I move ahead, you'll see that I have done quite a bit of refining and adding of color, but the values have all stayed pretty much the same as my base layer. That's one of the benefits of this base layer beforehand, is that you have a good map for yourself as to what is going to happen next and where the values are going to end up. And all you have to do is keep the final layers in a similar value and you're good to go. So moving around, finishing up the shadow on his face, on his ears. I'll do a little bit of refining around the nose area. And then I will come in with my highlight colors. I will give you an idea of how I mix those in a minute. So here I'm using kind of a peachy color to do the areas that aren't quite shadow but aren't quite into light yet. So this is a good opportunity to add a little bit of warmth, a little bit of color as we do the transition between light and shadow. And then I will go ahead and mix my light color. I've mixed up a color that is really nice and light and bright. Titanium white with a little bit of vermilion and a little bit of permanent yellow light. So it looks quite white in the video here, but it really is quite a warm, almost a peachy color. And I can add some pure white in there too, but white is quite a cool color, so by keeping the warmth in there against those cool shadows, it will add a little bit more contrast and really give the idea of strong sunlight on this little dog. Notice when you're watching this how my hand is very relaxed. That should show you that it's a very gentle touch. There's always a little bit of the water-soluble linseed oil in my paint to make it flow smoothly. And a few more touches of highlight to the cheek area. Skipping ahead here, you can see that the painting is much closer to being finished. I've still got the tape around the outside of where the painting is going to be because I painted this on unstretched canvas and I'll stretch it later. By the way, this painting is 10 inches by 10 inches and I've done it on a Antwerp single primed linen canvas. You can see that I've been repeating some of the colors I've already used on the dog in the background areas, picking up on the light blues, just refining. I'm keeping the background here really loose and expressive. This dog has a whole lot of energy and I wanted an energetic looking background that contrasted against the details I've put into the eyes and the nose. Now this is a dagger brush. It's a unique shape. It's the same soft synthetic that I have been using, but it's in a shape of kind of like a dagger, and it has proved to be really great for putting in little lines like whiskers, better than just a small fine brush. It just seems to hold the paint to draw a really nice thin line just by nature of the shape of this brush. Now be careful when you're painting whiskers on dogs, cats, or even horses that you don't want to put more detail, more whiskers than you would actually see if you were looking at the dog from this distance. This little dog has quite prominent little white whiskers, but I'm still not going to make them stand out too much. Just enough to give an indication, and I will often go in with the background color, which I still have on another brush, the background behind the whiskers, that is, which is actually the shadow color on the dog, and use that to make the whisker even thinner, to take it off completely, to change where it is, just to make the whiskers really subtle. A few more refinements, just keeping the whiskers subtle, and then I will reassess my background. Are there any areas that need just a few more layers of color? Just a bit of a subtle scrubbing in here and there. And I'll show you a detailed look at the finished painting.